Hi, my name is Margaret Begley, and I'm the Preceptorship Coordinator.
I'm Lisa Hart. I'm the Onboarding and Contract Compliance Coordinator for the College of Nursing.
And we're here today to just go over a few frequently asked questions and maybe some helpful hints that we've noted over the last semester or two as we've transitioned to eValue. We're hoping that maybe these will help answer some questions and kind of give you some guidance for moving forward.
The first
Go ahead.
first items that we'd like to address are on how to find a placement.
So, the first thing that I would suggest is we often have students say, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'll get a phone call and they might have said, I've reached out to all of these facilities, but nobody's getting back to me. I'll just tell you, as a research nurse in the past and having been in the field of nursing for many years, the first thing that I would say is a personal approach is always going to work in your best interest. If you're just submitting a placement request by making a cold call or sending a cold email and they have no idea who you are, likely it's probably going to be deleted and or the voice message is not going to be returned. You really have to put some effort into seeking clinical placements and finding them. It's very competitive, as you know. And the first thing I would suggest is actually physically making an appointment with an education coordinator or somebody, a business manager or somebody at the place that you're looking at going. It's much harder to say no to somebody when they have a face with a name and they can see how passionate you are about being placed. They can see how competent you are, and they can see that this is something that really is important to you. You have to do something that's going to set you out from everybody else, and a personal approach does that. The second thing is that I would also say, you know, depending on what track you're in, of course, this is going to largely guide the type of facilities that you're reaching out to. But don't forget about free clinics. Don't forget about rural areas. You know, a lot of times those urban areas are oversaturated. But if you're willing to drive a distance and if you're willing to get into some of these areas where they're not quite as competitive, you can find really great learning experiences there. So don't cut yourself short by not reaching out to some of the rural communities, some of the free clinics where they're always seeking volunteers and those kinds of things. It's never in your best interest, I shouldn't say never, but largely it's not in your best interest to just reach out to, say, a preceptor on a unit and say, hi, Dr. Smith, you know, can I work with you? I'm a Creighton nursing student and pursuing my, DNP. And he, of course, is going to say, sure, get hold of my office manager or something. Well, likely he said the same thing to 10 other students who've approached him. So again, go to the person who is actually authorizing these and making a difference. I think that's a common misconception, is students often think that because a preceptor approves them or says that they'll work with them, they think that it's solidified. Unfortunately, that isn't always the case. It has to go through business managers, portal systems, all kinds of things to get the ultimate approval. And we want to make sure our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. So it's going to require some due diligence on your part that way. And then an idea that Lisa suggested, and I'll let you talk about this, what Lisa's going to present might just be another level of documentation that would help us in the event that a facility comes back and says, no, we can't accommodate this request or whatever. And I'll let Lisa address that.
When you go to the clinic or the hospital education coordinator or office manager, I would suggest taking a syllabus or your course objectives to show that these are the things that I need to do. Is this something that you can accommodate here? I would also suggest taking the graduate practicum site request and the preceptor request forms to the office or to the educator and having them fill that out, or you fill it out and have them they'll give you that information, the address of the facility, the fax number, your contact person's information, just in case we don't have a contract, preceptor license information, how long they've been in practice. All of that information you're going to need anyway, so you might as well take that form with you to the site and to the education coordinator or office manager and have that information filled out. If they are really convinced that yes, they can do this, they will go ahead and sign that form for you and date it for you, just so that you have that information right then and there. You don't have to go back and ask them for that information and keep bugging them for that information.
And in the world of nursing, as we all know, I mean, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. So although this is not required at all for you to have them sign it, sometimes when it comes down to a situation where you thought that they gave you the approvals and I want to advocate for you, if I know who you spoke to and on what date you spoke to them, and if they have actually physically signed a form, it gives me maybe some leverage in saying, we really had all of our ducks in a row, and that, and they might be willing to reverse a decision in the event that they say they can't accommodate later or something. It just gives us another degree of leverage. So again, although not required, it's just something that we think might be valuable for you, and it provides that additional level of documentation.
In addition, when you're talking to the office manager or the preceptor that you would like to work with, you will need to make sure that the preceptor actually is an employee of the site. We are running into more and more preceptors who have to have a separate contract from the site, and then that's where we kind of run into a few issues trying to get those contracts initiated. So always ask them if they are an employee of the site. If they are not, find out where they are employed at.
Yeah, we're especially running into this with, and it's happening more and more, but we're especially running into this with like neonatal nurse practitioners. Often whole groups are contracted groups of a hospital system. And so unfortunately, although we may have a contract with a hospital, we might not have it with the particular MEDNAX group or obstetric group or Envision group that the actual preceptor is employed with. So again, so that we can all be on the same page, if we know that information up front, we can start navigating those contracts and initiating those contracts so that we're not caught off guard down the road when it's getting close to the time that you're being approved and we realize that the actual preceptor is not an employee of the facility. So an important question, always make sure the employee or the preceptor is an employee of that facility. And if not, please let us know right away where they're employed with. So if it's a contracted preceptor, so that we can get that going in your behalf.
Another thing to keep in mind is that if you're not an employee, you might not be guaranteed a placement there. So keep that in mind. They have a tiered system, and I'll let Margaret kind of talk about that.
So many times, facilities, especially if they're larger health networks, and especially if they use portal systems. Again, this is noted under the contract in the notes section that we try to put with each facility. But many facilities use a tiered approach, and it's usually 3 different tiers. The first tier and the highest tier is if you're with an academic partner. So for example, here in Omaha, Creighton University has an academic partnership with CHI, which is Catholic Health Initiatives. I do know in Minnesota, I'm going to use that as an example, Fairview and some of the other larger health systems have academic partnerships with the University of Minnesota. So if you're one of their affiliated priority schools, those are the students that get highest priority. Tier 2 is actually employees of that health system. So again, If you're an employee of CHI Health, but maybe not in their academic partner school, or in the example that I used above, Fairview, if you are a Fairview employee, but of course you're not a student at University of Minnesota, you're in Tier 2. Tier 3 is anybody else who isn't either in the academic partnership with an affiliated school and or is not an employee. I'll be honest with you, it is highly unlikely that you will get a placement as a Tier 3 request. In fact, I would venture to guess you will not get a placement as a Tier 3 employee or Tier 3 student request. So have a backup plan. I mean, and largely in the notes section, I will even be forbidden to put in requests on your behalf if you don't meet those two qualifications, either an academic partnership or an employee. As a highest priority, level Tier 1 A+ would be if you're in the academic partnership and you're an employee. I mean, those are the students that are likely to get placed first. I mean, they get the 5 gold stars. So again, be really conscious of if these facilities have specifics regarding how they approach placements. Usually this is driven in portal systems where there's large, where everybody is requesting into a very transparent portal system and everybody is held to the same standards. So just know that if it's a tiered approach to placements, please be mindful that if you're not Tier 1 and in some cases even Tier 2 can't get placed because of the competitiveness, just know you better look for a backup option. It's in your best interest.
Another thing to keep in mind if you are requesting a placement at Mayo is a student-specific contract, so if you might want to check with us to see if that would be an option. Another thing to keep in mind is make sure you are licensed in the state that you are requesting placement. You can always check your license to see if it is part of the license compact state, or if you don't have a license, you have to have one.
So again, don't submit a request into our portal for processing if you do not hold a current valid license in the state that you're requesting. Unfortunately, I mean, it's a lot of work for a lot of people, and we can't move your request forward anyway until you have a valid license in that state. One of the documents that Lisa has to submit for any kind of compliance in any kind of facility upfront is the fact that you're licensed and are able to, you have the capacity to work in that state. So do not submit a request into eValue for a facility that you are not authorized to work at, because in a state that you don't even have privileges for, it will get rejected.
Don't need to touch that. When submitting requests in eValue, please make sure that the location and the preceptor identified match the facility and the preceptor information in the portal. For example, if you are choosing CHI on 35th Street, make sure that you choose the location that CHI is located at. Again, the same with the preceptor. Make sure that the preceptor that you choose is a preceptor in that particular state. There are several John Smiths, for example. You want to make sure that you choose the correct John Smith. The other thing is make sure that when you're submitting a request that you identify the number of hours you want to work with that preceptor. Try to be as specific as possible. We don't want to be submitting a request to a site with a preceptor for 150 hours if you only need 35 hours.
Right. And it's in your best interest, really quick, just to kind of piggyback on Lisa. They might be willing to give you 35 hours, but if you're giving me the information that you need 150 hours, that's what I'm submitting to the site. And if they can't accommodate 150 hours, they might just deny that request, Where if I would have been more honest in submitting the 35 hours, because that's really what you needed, they may have been able to grant that 35-hour request. So again, the most accurate information that you can give us is in your best interest, because a site might be willing to give 3 individuals 30 hours, but not one individual 100 hours. So please be as specific as possible. We often get requests, like multiple requests from a student. They might put in 4 different requests at 4 different facilities, and in each facility they put 150 hours. Well, we know that they don't need, 600 hours in the course of that semester. So it kind of triggers a red flag, and oftentimes those requests get denied just because they can't accommodate all those hours.
Another thing to think about when submitting a request, you'll have a lot of, for example, if you want to go to Essentia and they have several different sites, if you are okay with going to any of the sites, please choose the site that you want to go first in the schedule request option, and then indicate the other sites that you're willing to go to on your form, and there is a comment section on that form. Another thing, make sure that if you have any updates to your placement request in the scheduler, make sure that you make those notes in eValue. Any comments or information that you want to give us, please make sure you put that in eValue. I think that was it.
Let's see. The Board of Nursing. So certain states do require Board of Nursing approval. A few that I can think of off the top of my head are Oregon, North Dakota, Alabama, states of that nature. Wyoming is another big one that we have students at. These do require formal Board of Nursing applications. There's oftentimes linked on that within the site specific, there will be linkable forms, but that information needs to come to me, and it's just another layer of approval. We do have to get full board approval from the Board of Nursing of that state in order for you to actually begin your clinical hours. So be thinking of that in advance so that we can make sure that we get the information to the board. Some boards only meet once a month, and if we don't meet their deadline date, it might be a month later before your application will even be reviewed by the board. So you want to make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time by submitting the paperwork in advance, which is brings up another good point. Many of the portals, for example, Minnesota-based portals, which is TCCP Minnesota, again, they have specific deadline dates that we must meet. We try to set our deadlines in order so that you can meet them, but unfortunately, different facility deadline dates override our deadline dates. So if you do not get the information to me and you want me to submit late on your behalf, I may or may not be able to do that depending on the type of portal and the actual mandates from the site. Some are very, very firm in their deadline dates. So we try to communicate those dates to you in advance so that we can set you up for success. But no, you've got to do your due diligence and get the information to me in time so that I can have time to process and get those submitted on your behalf to make sure that we can have your application submitted in time that it can be considered even.
Another thing I want you guys to know is that we are processing probably about 600 requests a semester.
True.
So constant emails asking about the status of your placement. All of that information will be in eValue, so you don't need to email us regarding that. We will keep you posted.
Right. That is the beauty of the eValue portal, is that it is transparent. If we've touched your application, if we have any new news, if we've submitted something on your behalf, if there's a My Clinical Exchange or a TCCPN Minnesota portal number, all of those things will be referenced in the comment section of your actual request. So sending us an extra email sometimes delays the processing of getting through these 600 requests, and or we don't have any other information to add at that current time, because again, anytime we've touched your application or we have any new information regarding it, it is documented in the comment section for you. The last thing I want to stress is oftentimes people are asking us, what are the start and stop dates for a semester? We follow the College of Nursing academic calendar. All of the academic calendars can be found on the registrar's homepage at Creighton University. But nursing itself has a specific calendar for nursing courses. So you may follow a different calendar if you're in, for example, an NCR course or a different type of a program that's a graduate program. But if your course begins with NUR, which is a nursing course, it follows the academic calendar for nursing. We cannot approve start dates that are earlier than the nursing academic calendar, and we cannot allow extensions beyond the current semester. There is no banking of hours moving forward. How we've kind of remedied that, which is helpful for you, is that the start date is the start date. So it is the first day of the start of the semester going by the academic calendar that is the College of Nursing. However, through a semester, you're able to extend your hours to the last day of the semester, which would be the day before the new semester begins. So where this is particularly beneficial for students is in the fall semester, and I'm going to address that specifically. The fall semester typically begins late August. Let's just say it's the 20th of August. Although your classes may be done by early December, the 8th or 9th of December, so that we go on fall break, you would be able to complete hours up until the 14th of January if the 15th of January was the beginning of the newest semester and we came back. With the exception of when the university is officially closed. So during that fall semester, although you might be done with classes on the 9th of December, we are still open to right between Christmas Eve and basically New Year's. During that time frame between when the university is officially closed, which is, it varies calendar to calendar, but the week between Christmas and New Year's, the university is actually closed. During that time, you cannot complete clinical hours, and that's because it's contractual. We have to have a faculty member and we have to have staff like Lisa and I available 24/7 during the time that you are actually completing clinical hours. And that's because if there's an issue that arises, if you would be injured, God forbid something would happen, somebody has to be available to answer a call or be accessible. During official closure of the university, we do not have access to legal and compliance and all of those things. You cannot complete clinical hours during that time. But that does not mean that you won't maybe receive an incomplete for your course, but what it will do is prevent you from not being able to progress into your following course if you complete the clinical hours by the time that the next semester begins. So by the 14th of January. If you can clear up the remainder of the clinical hours that you need from December 9th to the January 14th, in this particular instance, you will still be allowed to progress into the courses that you're registered for the spring semester. So I hope that clarifies a bit on calendars and how that works. Again, there's no banking of hours. The hours that you complete have to be completed for the course in which you're currently enrolled, but it allows you a little bit of an extension in order to get those calendar hours in the event that maybe you had during the semester you were sick or a family member was sick or you were, out of the country, regarding work or had some kind of an instance where you weren't able to complete your hours or maybe your preceptor was off ill or something along those lines. It allows you that extension to complete the hours that you already requested. It does not give you permission to, during that time frame, complete hours that will be credited then to the following semester. That's not allowed. So I hope that clarifies. Lisa, anything more that you could say regarding that? Deadline dates. You can go ahead and talk about it.
Well, we have deadline dates. Most of those are set up because of our portal system. So please make sure you follow our deadline dates or that of the facility. The facility takes precedence. If you do not meet those deadline dates, we will look at these on a one-by-one basis and make decisions as to whether they will incur late fees.
There was an email that was sent out, and this is not our decision. This is coming from upper administration. So again, regarding fees and types of penalty assessments, deadline dates are for a reason, and it's not meant to be punitive. It honestly is to set you up for success, because a lot of times, placements are on a first come first served basis, or again, because Lisa and I are processing approximately 600 graduate requests a semester, we have to have things in time so that we can meet the deadlines of the portals and ensure that we can get your placement requests. We do process placement requests in the order in which they were received. So again, it's always in your best interest to be proactive and to submit as early as possible, because in fairness to all other students and to be transparent, your request will be processed in the order in which it was received. So if it's the very last placement request, the day before a due date for a portal placement, I cannot guarantee you that we will meet that date for you. So again, be cognizant of the fact that we need to be transparent and be fair to all students. All student requests are very important, and every student wants to ensure that their placements can be approved, and we want to do that as well, but deadline dates are for a reason. And with that, again, due diligence on your part. Just submitting a request by a deadline date that you didn't do due diligence in and you didn't get the approvals for, and that gets rejected, does not mean then, because that request was submitted on time, but it fell through, that your following requests won't be subject to these late fees. If it was not approved and it was based on the facility that didn't approve it, for example, they changed a preceptor on you, it was largely out of your control, something along those lines, we couldn't get the contract to go through despite our best intentions and everybody's best efforts. That's one thing, and of course, those are what Lisa refers to as the individual basis. However, if you just submitted a request in, and we have had this happen frequently, students submit requests, and yet we submit off all the compliance paperwork to the facility, and the facility is like, who is this student? They haven't reached out to me. I've never given them approval. Again, that's not the due diligence that we're speaking of, and that's where it comes back to maybe taking those forms in, like Lisa talked about earlier on in this presentation, where it gives us a little bit more leverage. If requests get denied and it was because there just didn't appear to be the correct approvals, and you maybe didn't follow the processes of the facility, and what appears to be due diligence wasn't followed, then late entries and late submissions will be subject potentially to those penalty fees. So we want to be really clear in that just because you submit a request prior to a deadline, if it was just submitted and it really wasn't approved or authorized, late requests will potentially be subject to fees. Is that it? I think that covers it. Those were just some of the tips and some of the questions that we often get, and we just wanted to make this as transparent as possible and keep it viewable for everybody for future. If you have any other concerns, always feel free to give us an email, but just know that we are hoping that by providing these kinds of Q&A sessions and informational sessions and instructional videos, that we can prevent getting overwhelmed with emails, because every time that we stop for emails, it delays processing of requests, and we want to make sure that we can get to your requests as efficiently as possible. So we certainly appreciate your time. Again, feel free to reach out to us if necessary, and we hope you found this beneficial and helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much and have a great day.